If you're watching this because Fallout 4 suddenly lost DLC you paid for on PlayStation, I want to be clear right away. I'm not going to pretend there's a magic fix that works for everyone. This video exists because over the last week or two, I've spent a ridiculous amount of time digging into this problem myself. I've read hundreds of YouTube comments, if not thousands. I've spent hours scrolling through Reddit threads, checked PlayStation support posts, watched other YouTube creators, and cross-checked what players are actually reporting versus what the official advice says should work. And what I found is frustrating but also important. Most of the common fixes people recommend are not fake. They're just unreliable. And for a lot of PlayStation players, they don't work at all. Let me explain why. This all started after the Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition update. That's when PlayStation players began reporting the same core issues over and over again. DLC that was fully paid for, sometimes years ago, suddenly shows as not installed in the Fallout 4 menu. Saves refuse to load because content is missing. Settlements collapse because DLC objects no longer exist. DLC areas like Far Harbor or Nuka World won't trigger. And in some cases, the game won't even let players reinstall the DLC at all. A few days ago, I made this video, and I pinned a comment asking players to report exactly what happened to them. Platform, disc or digital, season pass or individual DLC, mods or no mods. The results were overwhelming. And the most important thing is this: there is no single pattern that explains everyone's problem. Some players are on PS4, some on PS5, some use discs, some bought digital, some never touched mods, some did, some own the season pass, some bought DLC individually, yet the outcome is often the same. Paid content disappears. That's why this issue is not being solved by a single fix. Let's start with the most common recommendation: restoring licenses. You've probably seen this everywhere. You go into PlayStation settings, restore licenses, restart the console, and check the add-ons menu. Now, to be fair, this does seem to work for some players. I'm not denying that. And if you haven't tried this yourself, you should. It's quick, low risk, and there is a chance it might work for you. But based on hundreds of comments on my own videos, as well as across Reddit threads, restoring licenses fails for a large portion of affected players, especially PS4 players and disc owners. Why? Because restoring licenses only refreshes what PlayStation thinks you own. It does not force Fallout 4 itself to reassociate those licenses correctly inside the game. In other words, PlayStation may say your DLC is installed, while Fallout 4 still says it isn't. That's the first major disconnect. The second issue is version confusion, especially on PS5. A lot of players now have both the PS4 and PS5 versions of Fallout 4 available. After the update, PlayStation doesn't always make it clear which one you're launching. I found dozens of reports where players were unknowingly opening the PS4 version while expecting PS5 behavior, or vice versa. In some cases, DLC appeared in one version, but not the other. In other cases, neither version recognized it correctly. Even worse, disc owners are often locked into the PS4 version because their license originates from a physical disc, and the PS5 version doesn't always validate the DLC properly. So players do everything right, but they're running the wrong executable. Again, that's not user error, that's system ambiguity.
Guys, really quick, I'm trying to make it as a full-time YouTuber, and if you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing. It truly means a lot and it makes a big difference. Okay, back to the video.
Then there's the clean reinstall advice. It says you should delete the game, then reinstall it, and then download DLC again. On paper, that should work. In reality, many players report that Fallout 4 simply refuses to reinstall DLC even after a clean reinstall. The add-ons menu shows the DLC as purchased but not installed, with no install option. Or it installs but Fallout 4 still claims it's missing. I've seen this reported most often by PS4 disc owners, players who bought DLC years ago, and players whose saves depend heavily on workshop DLC. And once that happens, reinstalling again doesn't fix it. You're stuck in a loop. Another major factor is how the Anniversary and Creation Club content was rolled out. Some players found that launching Fallout 4 and using the Install All Own Content option inside the Creation Club triggered missing DLC to download correctly. Others tried the exact same thing and got nothing. The difference appears to be account-level entitlement mismatches. If Fallout 4 fails to correctly sync what Bethesda thinks you own with what PlayStation thinks you own, no amount of reinstalling fixes that. And this is where the real problem lives. This is a licensing failure, not just a simple bug. PlayStation players do not have rollback options. You cannot revert Fallout 4 to a previous version. You cannot lock updates. Once the update breaks your entitlement chain, you're at the mercy of Bethesda and Sony fixing it on their end. That's why so many comments say things like, "I did everything and nothing worked." Because from the player side, there is nothing left to do. Disc owners face even more issues. If you own the Fallout 4 Game of the Year disc, your DLC license may be tied to the disc itself, a one-time DLC code, a specific PSN account, a specific region. If any of those don't line up perfectly after the update, Fallout 4 may refuse to recognize your DLC. I've seen cases where players inserted the disc, restored licenses, reinstalled everything, and still got nothing, because the PS5 version doesn't properly validate disc-based DLC entitlements in all situations. Region mismatches are another silent killer. If your disc is from one region and your PSN account is from another, DLC compatibility can break completely, and there is no fix for that. None. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with an uncomfortable truth. Most of the common fixes are not solutions. They are filters. They work only if your licenses are intact, your version matches your DLC, your account region aligns, and your entitlement sync wasn't corrupted by the update. If any one of those fails, the fixes don't work. That's why the comments feel so chaotic, because the underlying failure isn't consistent across players. I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying players shouldn't try these steps. If your DLC disappeared, restoring licenses, checking versions, reinstalling, and manually downloading add-ons are still worth attempting. But if they don't work, it's not because you did something wrong. It's because the problem is upstream from you. For players still affected after trying everything, the only remaining steps are escalation. Bethesda support needs to verify entitlements on their side. PlayStation support needs to verify licenses on theirs. And yes, that process is slow, frustrating, and often leads nowhere. But that's the reality. The reason I made this video is simple. I didn't want to be another creator throwing out a checklist and pretending it solves everything. I wanted to document what's actually happening based on real player reports, not guesses. I've read your comments, I've read Reddit, I've watched other creators, and I've seen the same story repeated hundreds of times. Paid content is disappearing, and PlayStation players don't have the tools to fix it themselves. If you're affected by this, you are, unfortunately, one of many. And if you're angry, that reaction absolutely makes sense. You paid for your game and your DLCs, probably a while ago, and now the content you paid for is rendered unusable by an update you couldn't refuse, and very possibly an update you didn't even want in the first place. If anything changes, if a real fix emerges that works consistently, I'll cover it immediately. But until then, I'd rather be honest than optimistic. If this video helped you understand what's going on, share it. Not to stir drama, but so other players don't blame themselves for something that isn't their fault. And if you've tried something that actually worked for you, please leave it in the comments. That's how we separate noise from truth. Because right now, I think clarity matters more than false hope. Until something actually changes on Bethesda or Sony's end, there isn't much more PlayStation players can do. So here's what I'm thinking. If Fallout 4 is effectively broken for a lot of people right now, maybe the most useful thing I can do next isn't another video saying the same thing, but helping you find games that scratch that Fallout itch and actually work on PlayStation. I've got a few ideas for what the next video could be, but I want to hear from you first. I pinned a comment. Vote there and tell me what you'd like to see next.